Good afternoon. Welcome to the first in our series of educational webinars, the NAFEM Show Space Selection Essentials and Important Dates. My name is Alice Konopasek, and I'm a NAFEM team member here in Chicago at headquarters. And here with me today are Jackie Janis, our Senior Exhibits Manager, and Kelsey Kwasniak, our Senior Exhibits Coordinator. We're excited to kick off another NAFEM show. And if you're a seasoned trade show contact with us who has been to many of our events, or someone new to the industry, we're glad you're here. And we want to provide you with as much information as we can to make your NAFEM show experience successful. As noted, this is the first webinar in our educational series. And during the next few months, we'll present webinars on topics we think that you'll find useful. To find out what we have scheduled, take a look at the NAFEMshow.org, go to the resources section, exhibitor education, and sign up there. Before we get started today, I want to point out some important details about the show and today's webinar. The NAFEM show dates are February 26th through 28th at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Show days are Wednesday through Friday with a kickoff party on Tuesday evening. All webinars are recorded and available to you in the exhibitor education section of the show website at thenafemshow.org. If you have any questions about today's webinar, please send them to us by using the Q&A function in your Zoom webinar control panel. And we'll answer everything that we can. And if we run out of time, we will reach back out to you after the webinar is over to provide you with the answers that you need. If you have something that's very specific to your company, we ask if you could just send us a note at info@thenafemshow.org, and our team will assist you further with that. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kelsey to talk about what you came to hear. And that's the NAFEM Show Space Selection Essentials and Important Dates. Kelsey, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. So as you'll see, our agenda here for today's webinar, we're going to be reviewing space selection communications, the floor plan, how to prepare for the online space selection, what to expect the day of space selection, the NAFEM show rules and regulations, upcoming important dates, and we're going to finish with Q&A. As you can see, we'll cover quite a few topics today, so let's go ahead and get started. So on August 5th, your company was sent an email to the trade show contact email address provided on your contract. The email contains your company's space selection date and time, along with the Zoom link to select your space and the online floor plan. Please note all space selection times are provided in the Central Time Zone. Again, just to repeat, all of your space selection times received on August 5th are in the Central Time Zone. So if you are located outside of this time zone, please make sure to take this into account when adding the appointment to your calendar. If you have not yet received these details, or perhaps they might have gone to your spam or junk folders, we do recommend double checking. Otherwise, you can also send info@thenafemshow.org an email, and we can resend this information to you. Now, keep in mind, space selection does take place over the next 2 weeks. So that means the week of August 19th, which is next week, is going to be for all member companies with 200 or more priority points. The week of August 26th is space selection for members with less than 200 points, as well as NAFEM associate members that are eligible to exhibit and non-members. Please do keep in mind that when there are multiple companies within the same point category, a random drawing has been conducted to determine the assignment order within that particular category. Associate members and non-members are going to be assigned space in the order their contract was received after all members with priority points have first been assigned. If at any point you need to review your priority points, you can also find them on the NAFEM website at www.nafem.org. You can easily sign into the members area of the nafem.org website and scroll down to the priority points section of the dashboard. Now, in preparation for space selection, don't forget to RSVP to confirm your company's participation in your designated space selection date and time. The link to RSVP was provided in the email sent to your trade show contact on August 5th. So do make sure to click on that link also provided in this slide deck here, which will be shared afterwards to make sure that you have confirmed your appointment for space selection. And finally, do keep in mind that the week of September 2nd, after space selection has closed, your company's trade show contact will receive an email confirming your exhibit space. Your booth number and your booth size will be listed. Please be sure to review that confirmation along with your booth location on the online floor plan after space selection, and do notify the NAFEM exhibits team if there are any discrepancies. So now that we get into understanding and navigating our floor plan, you'll want to first, of course, find our floor plan, which is on www.thenafemshow.org. And we'll go ahead and navigate there right now. So on the NAFEMshow.org, you'll select Exhibit, and then hover under Show Details, where you'll see our floor plan. I would highly recommend bookmarking this page to your web browser, so that way you can easily access it in preparation for space selection, as well as on the day of your company's space selection. There we go. So when navigating this floor plan, keep in mind there are going to be zoom in and zoom out buttons, or you can use your mouse or laptop trackpad to be able to navigate the floor plan. As we know, this is a very large floor plan. Please take note of our key right here, which identifies our show management areas, as well as the different types of booth sizes that we do offer.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Jackie.
Yes.
Can you switch your screen to show the floor plan, please?
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yes. There we go. Sorry about that. So looking at our floor plan here, as I mentioned before, we have our full floor plan if I zoom out here at the Georgia World Congress Center in Halls BC. And what I mentioned before, there is the key here. This will note all of our show management areas that NAFEM will have, as well as our different size booths. Now, there are a few key areas on this floor plan you'll want to take note of as you prepare to decide which space you would like to select before your space selection time. So if I zoom in here, you'll go ahead and see our 2 entrances at the bottom. Now, just to give everyone an idea of orientation, the bottom of this screen here is going to be Hall B. And the center here is going to be what we call the BC connector. And then behind here is going to be Hall C, which you can also see labeled throughout the floor plan. So our primary 2 entrances are going to be right here. Now, keep in mind the entrance on the bottom left is going to have people coming from our registration area, as well as the GWCC primary entrance to enter the convention center. And note that we also are in relation to the Signia by Hilton. If you are staying there, is coming from this direction. Now, keep in mind these 2 entrances that we've noted here in terms of traffic flow going up into the floor plan will be our only 2 entrances used during show hours. Registration and the shuttle drop area will also be located down here. Okay. In addition, we have food and beverage areas noted throughout the floor, which are subject to change. We have a larger area located here, as well as others located throughout the floor plan with this fork and knife icon throughout. Our bathrooms are also noted with these icons throughout the floor plan as well. Now, if I go to the back of Hall C here, we're going to be looking at our NAFEM booth. Now, keep in mind the NAFEM booth is placed on the show floor where attendees and exhibitors can stop to ask questions about NAFEM, the NAFEM show, network, and take a break. There'll be plenty of seating and the ability to charge your devices. And once again, channel partners, CEFESA, FCSI, FIDA, and MAFC are co-locating within the NAFEM booth. We also have 3 lounges on the show floor, so keep in mind those are in purple throughout. Here, here, down in Hall B, and then we have one in the back of Hall C. We've also brought back the What's Hot, What's Cool area on the floor right here. This wow-worthy gallery of the latest ENS highlights, new product solutions that have an impact on real-life food service operations. So contracted exhibitors are going to be invited to submit one product for consideration that is not only new, meaning it's been introduced to the market after the NAFEM show in 2023, but has been put to the test, demonstrating success and value add in the areas of design, cost reduction, revenue generation, as well as any kind of labor time, energy footprint automation. Only 75 products will be selected. And then also new this year is the U.S. Culinary Open area. This is going to be the inaugural launch of the U.S. Culinary Open, which will be a competition for professional chefs competing for the title of U.S. Culinary Open champion. The competition is a modern and true reflection of the diversity of skilled culinarians in the U.S., with 12 of America's most talented professional chefs competing in a 2-day competition. Judges are renowned, and chefs will be competing for first, second, and third place. So just watch our NAFEM show website for more information. Going up here, back near the NAFEM area, we have our at center stage area on the floor plan, which we also had in 2023. This is going to be the NAFEM show's educational stage on the show floor, where the hottest topics and emerging trends will be highlighted. There'll be a theater sound system, so that is something to keep in mind when selecting near this space. Also, we do have, similar to previous years, our cleanup areas for any kind of dishes or areas that you need to clean up. They are located in dark purple right here, on the side here in Hall B, as well as over here in Hall C. Next up, as we look back on our floor plan, we're going to talk more specifically about booth sizes. So there are going to be 4 booth sizes this show, which we have our 10 by 10s, which will be green, our 12 by 10s in blue, and our 15 by 10s in yellow, and then finally our 20 by 20 areas in purple. So let me just go back to the floor plan and just show for the visual. You can easily see here what different booth size options we have in the key, as well as throughout the floor plan. So for those of you that might be looking for an inline booth, all of the green, blue, yellow, and purple booths can all be made to be an individual booth or combined to make a longer inline booth. Now, as we scroll in here to get a better look, keep in mind you're going to see space in between all of our blue, yellow, and green booths. This area in between those booths is going to be the service aisle. So if you would like to select an inline space, just keep in mind you will have a 10-foot service aisle in between your booths, which will allow any kind of utilities to be placed and hidden. Keep in mind an inline booth is never going to face any of these service aisles. All the inline booths will always face other booths. So just keep that in mind if you're selecting an inline space. Now, for those of you that might be looking for 20 wide booths, you'll want to look for any of the purple spaces on the floor. Those are all 20-foot wide spaces. Any of these booths in the 20-foot wide areas can be combined to make any kind of split islands, or any of the corner inline spaces that are already built in. And then finally, looking at our blue, yellow, green spaces, any of these spaces can be combined to make islands, inlines, peninsulas, and they are sold in a 30 wide block. So for an example, let's say you'd like a 30 by 50 space. You can easily combine this area here, or you could even combine this area here, as each blue, yellow, and green block is going to add up to 30 feet wide. So if you would like a 30 by 50, that means that we have it 30 wide here. So I would need to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I would go across. This would give you your 30 by 50 space. And we could make this a peninsula, which means you would have booths on the other side of you, or you can be an island space, which means we would cut the 2 booths behind you, and then you would be open on all 4 sides. Now keep in mind, depending on how custom your request is on the floor plan, in the example I just showed, if we needed to make an aisle in between to allow you to be open on all 4 sides, our NAFEM exhibits team will communicate during your space selection time if that would then appropriate an aisle fee or corner fees, or a mixture of the 2. In the example that I gave just now, where we talked about a 30 by 50 space, we would have to cut 2 spaces behind you to allow you to be open on 4 sides. So that would be 1 aisle fee at $5,000, and then you would also pay for 2 corners, as you have 2 corners on the bottom there. If you have a more custom request, let's say you would like a 50 by 50, that would require us to cut more space. So you may then be assessed additional aisle fee charges, depending on what's available at the time of your space selection appointment. So do keep this in mind as you're asking those questions to our NAFEM exhibits team during your space selection appointment. An important rule that you also want to remember when building your booth and selecting is that the booth width must be less or equal to the booth length for any booths that are going to be larger than 600 square feet. So what does that really mean exactly? If you're looking to have a 30 by 70 booth, let's say, then you're going to need to go vertically up, not horizontally. That means I can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and only up 3. That would be a very long booth and a very skinny booth, and it would take too much real estate on the floor plan. So you would need, if you wanted a 30 by 70, to build it here, being 30 wide and then 70 deep. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at options before your space selection appointment. And finally, on the floor plan, I also want to note, by zooming in here, as they are very faint on this floor plan, but throughout here, you're going to see these little small square boxes throughout. These are our utility icons on the floor plan. So keep in mind these are electrical floor ports, as well as where other utilities such as water, gas, and air could be run in order to service your booth, depending on what your needs are. And then of course, throughout you are going to see, and this is also referenced in the key up here, the different icons noting either any kind of fire hoses, fire extinguishers, columns, and their sizes. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at the floor plan, if you want to be cognizant of not having any kind of column in your booth. And finally, if I zoom all the way out, all of our red aisles that you're seeing here that are labeled throughout, these are our fire and no freight aisles. So keep in mind, these aisles need to be kept clear of all freight during move in and move out in order to keep clear pathways for forklifts throughout the show floor. Now, what this means for space selection is that maybe you wanted to take this space and combine it with this space. Unfortunately, we would not be able to accommodate that request, as we cannot, for safety purposes and per the GWCC building code, would not allow to combine space over this area. Now, if you wanted a larger space, you could easily build within each section to give you that larger space that you need. So how are you going to prepare for space selection? To ensure a smooth and time-efficient space selection, please be sure to practice navigating the floor plan ahead of time. Becoming familiar with the type of booth that you are looking for, such as an inline, a peninsula, or an island space, which we'll review in just a few minutes, and understand the different colors that you can select from based on the type of booth you need. Of course, if you have any additional questions, we'll have Q&A at the end of this webinar, and you can always reach out to us at info@thenafemshow.org if you're unsure of what booth size might be right for you or how to combine your space to give you what you need. Keep in mind the floor plan link is going to be live the entire time during space selection, so it will reflect all the space that has been selected to date each day, which gets updated in real time throughout each day of space selection. Space selection, as a reminder, is going to take place over August 19th through the 29th, and the floor plan is going to be constantly changing during this 2-week time frame as companies select their space. So please be sure to check availability of booths the day before, the hour before, and especially a few minutes prior to your call-in time on Zoom to ensure you have a list of booths in mind that will work for your company. Companies are selecting space every 5 minutes or so. So keep in mind that even if a booth looks to be open a few minutes before your appointment, it may be that the company right ahead of you has already selected that space. So we do recommend having 3 to 5 top choices before you hop onto your Zoom appointment. Now, after you select your booth space, it is important to keep an eye on the floor plan to ensure you still like your space as booths develop around you. Note that NAFEM will not notify you if a competitor chooses a booth space near you or if an island booth that can build up to 16 feet tall selects next to your booth. If you're unhappy with your booth location at any point, whether during space selection or in the weeks to follow, we are happy to move you to a different location based on current availability on the floor plan. So, space selection day. On your scheduled day of space selection, please join us via the Zoom link provided in the email sent on August 5th at your designated selection time. You will automatically enter into our waiting room, and based on your scheduled time, our exhibits team will admit you to our main meeting room to then be assigned to one of our team members in a breakout room to assist you in officially picking your space. So you'll want to be prompt when joining Zoom, as companies are scheduled just a few minutes apart, so any delay can have a domino effect on the following companies. If you have multiple people joining you to select your space together, we do recommend all of you joining about 5 minutes before your appointment, so that way you can all join the main meeting room at the same time, and then we can send you over to the breakout room with our team to pick your space. So keep that in mind if you have multiple people that are working with you to select your booth space. And I can't stress this enough about being prepared when you join Zoom. So if you have multiple team members joining, as I just mentioned, if you have those that might be joining later on, or maybe you can't make your appointment time, you'll want to send us a list of your top 3 to 5 choices in advance, so then we can pick on your behalf based on your contract, so that you don't miss your slot and then have to pick at the end of space selection. Now, keep in mind, during your space selection appointment, the exhibits team member that works with you will be able to confirm your booth number and your booth size while on Zoom, as well as any additional charges. As we mentioned earlier, if you have maybe a very custom booth request, if you have an island request, you're going to be charged either corner or aisle fees or a combination of the two. So our exhibits team member will confirm those additional charges, which will then show on your invoice that is sent the week of September 2nd after. Now, keep in mind, as you're picking space and our team is building that space for you on the floor plan, it typically takes about up to 5 minutes for it to show live on the floor plan while we're building it and taking multiple appointments. As long as your exhibits team member from NAFEM says that you are all set and good to go, you know that that space is going to be locked in and you will see it live on the floor plan. We do still recommend that after you see it on the floor plan, you take a look at it, make sure that it is still correct based on what you discussed with our NAFEM team. And if for any reason it is incorrect, please hop back onto Zoom or send us an email at info@thenafemshow.org, and we can make sure that it is correct as soon as possible. And as a final reminder, your company's trade show contact will receive that confirmation and invoice the week of September 2nd. So it will not be immediate after your appointment, but that following week or 2 weeks, depending on when your space selection day and time is. Define the NAFEM show rules and regulations, especially as you're preparing to select space, as well as design your space. It's always really good to look at our rules and regulations. You can easily find these on the NAFEMshow.org website under our resources section. I always recommend printing these out, as you can then read through them and ensure your company abides by all of the NAFEM show rules. Again, I want to remind you to continue to check the floor plan between August and the show to see changes to neighboring booths and areas. There are going to be adjustments made to the floor plan, and it is important to understand your exhibit space prior to arriving on site. Now, I would like to take a few minutes to explain our booth construction rules. They are strictly enforced on site for the sole purpose of ensuring all the exhibitors have a clear sight line within 10 feet of a neighboring booth. But since we have a limited amount of time, I'll only review some of the most common rule violations that we see based on the booth type. And we've also linked this helpful video here as well, which the slide deck will be made available at the end of the webinar, probably by tomorrow. So then that way you can review this video as well as our rules and regulations. So starting with inline booths, the most common rule violations that we see is when you have a display or product in the front of your booth that is taller than 4 feet. Now, any items in your booth that are taller than 4 feet cannot be within 5 feet from the aisle when you are within 10 feet of a neighboring exhibitor. So for example, the NAFEM floor managers on site may ask you to either remove or push this item to the back of your booth, so long as it does not impede 5 feet from the aisle when you are within 10 feet of a neighboring exhibitor. This just ensures a clear line of sight so that you're not blocking any of your neighbors. So for example, this item right here, if it's over 4 feet tall, we would ask you to push it to the very back of your space. So any kind of stands, magazine stands, product counters, it cannot be in the front 5 feet of your space if it's over 4 feet tall. The second most common inline booth violation we see is having a display or backdrop that is taller than 8 feet in the very back here. If you're an inline booth, nothing in your booth can be over 8 feet tall in the back of your space. This will be very easy to note on site, as we do have pipe and drape that is set up throughout the floor plan for inline spaces, and it is only 8 feet tall. So it is very easy to see that if your banner or any kind of stand in the back of your booth is over 8 feet tall, it'll be very easy for the NAFEM team to be able to see that it is too tall, and we will ask for you to remove it as it does violate our show rules. Now, also for inline spaces, for any kind of exhibitors that manufacture walk-in coolers, refrigerators, and freezers, and they select inline spaces, you are required to purchase a booth with a depth of 15 feet. Now, as a reminder, also noted in this image here, that is any of the yellow booths. So if you're an exhibitor that manufactures walk-in coolers, refrigerators, and freezers, you are going to need that deeper space. So that way you're not having your equipment go out into the aisle. This ensures that any kind of walk-in cooler, refrigerator, freezer is 5 feet from the aisle and not blocking any sight lines from your neighboring exhibitors. Now, if you're looking to get a peninsula booth, this is a booth that is open on only 3 sides. So the 4th side of the booth is going to be adjacent to another booth. You might be, and most likely it's that you're adjacent to other inline spaces. So a peninsula is going to be composed of a minimum of 4 individual booth units, and the maximum height allowance for the center of your peninsula is going to be 16 feet. So keep that in mind for any kind of exhibit fixtures that are on the floor, as well as ID signs. And then if you have a hanging sign for your peninsula, just a reminder that for any hanging sign, it can't be taller than 20 feet in height from the floor to the top of the display, to the top of your hanging sign. Now, the most common rule violation that we see with peninsulas is that any kind of display fixtures that are over 4 feet in height and placed within 10 feet of a neighboring exhibit, which needs to be confined to that area of the exhibitor space, which is at least 5 feet from the aisle line. So let me explain that a little bit more. This means that if you're a peninsula and you're open on 3 sides, you need to have anything that is in the first 5 feet of your booth, the front 5 feet of your booth, it can't be over 4 feet. So you might have a countertop or a display, a magazine display or something that is over 4 feet in height that cannot be placed at the very front of your booth as soon as people walk in. It does need to be pushed to the back of your booth, at least 5 feet back. This allows us to ensure that there is that sight line, as we explained earlier, so that way everybody can see everyone's booth all the way down the aisle. And finally, we have our island booths. This island booth is an island because it's open to all four sides, and it's composed of a minimum of 4 individual booth units. So the most common rule to keep in mind for an island booth is that you are able to build or have a product that is up to 16 feet tall in any part of your booth with an island. And for any hanging sign, you'll just have to keep in mind that it can't be taller than 20 feet. Again, similar to a peninsula, the hanging sign cannot be taller than 20 feet from the floor to the top of the hanging sign. So if you have a very wide hanging sign, which we do see commonly, you'll need to make sure that the very top of it is not more than 20 feet from the top to the floor. So let's make sure that we can prevent any kind of on-site headaches for your team. Let us check your floor plans, your booth renderings. If there's any violations in your diagram, our team will make sure to find them and let you know so that you can make alternate plans before you get to the show rather than working on site to find a solution. You can always send them to us at info@thenafemshow.org. And in addition to that, if you're already planning to send your diagram over, that means that you would be an exhibitor that is taking an island space, a split island, peninsula, modified peninsula, or you manufacture walk-in coolers, refrigerators, or freezers. Or if you received a written booth violation at the NAFEM show in 2023. Any company that falls under that category is going to be required to submit a detailed floor plan with dimensions, including hanging signage, to NAFEM show management for review and approval by November 8th. Floor plans can be submitted through your Exhibitor Resource Center, which we will open on September 18th. Now, throughout this webinar, we've run through a lot of these critical dates that we've already mentioned, but I'm going to run through for them one more time just so that everyone has them saved on their calendars. So looking at the week of August 19th and August 26th, we will be hosting our online space selection via Zoom. On September 18th, the Exhibitor Resource Center will be available for exhibitors to access. Now, keep in mind the Exhibitor Resource Center is where you're going to be able to register for your exhibitor badges, access the Exhibitor Services Manual, and more in order to ensure you have everything ready for your booth. These details are going to be sent via email on September 18th to your trade show contact. On November 1st, any kind of changes that are made to your booth size during space selection, keep in mind, will not be financially penalized. However, once your space has been selected after the next 2 weeks, NAFEM will keep 25% of the total booth fee for all reductions or cancellations made on or before November 1st. So if for any reason you increase or decrease your booth size during space selection, you will not be penalized at all. If you increase your space, you'll of course be charged for the additional space, but if you decrease, you will not be penalized. After you select your space, you will be held to the November 1st deadline, in which then NAFEM would keep that 25%. Now, if any space is canceled or reduced after November 1st, the exhibitor is going to still remain responsible for the full space rental charge for the originally contracted exhibit space. So November 1st is going to be the due date when your full exhibit space balance is due. Also keep in mind that your detailed floor plans are going to be due on November 8th. Again, for any exhibitor that has an island, split island, peninsula, any exhibitors that manufacture walk-in coolers, refrigerators, or freezers. And then please note that for any booth configuration eligible to have a hanging sign, such as an island booth, no hanging signs are going to be permitted to be rigged over an aisle. The hanging sign has to be rigged over the confines of your contracted booth space. So if you received a booth violation at the 2023 show, you're also required to submit a detailed floor plan regardless of your booth size by November 8th. In addition to that, if you are not required, let's say you have an inline space and normally you don't submit a diagram, and maybe you just want our team to look at it, you can also submit those to us at any time, in which we're happy to take a look at those and help prevent any kind of violations on site for your team. One other important rule as we're talking about diagrams, I just want to call out, hanging signs are permitted in all peninsulas, modified peninsulas, split islands, and island booths to a maximum height of 20 feet from the floor to the top of the sign. Booth structures must remain at 16 feet from the floor to the top of the structure, but the hanging sign can go up to 20 feet. So just keep that in mind as you're developing your diagrams by November 8th. And of course, we've linked here our ongoing education webinar and video series, which you can always find on the nafemshowwebsite.org to be able to view all of our videos, including this one today, which will be up tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to have Alice and Jackie hop back on, and we're going to begin our Q&A. And keep in mind, if our team does not address your questions live here today, we will take note of these questions and then follow up with you individually.
So I'm actually going to do this from behind the scenes because it's not giving me the cue to be able to change
Problem.
my appearance. So I'm going to do this from the background. So as Kelsey noted, I mean, you can always go to the nafemshow.org for more information. You can always contact us by sending us a question through info@thenafemshow.org, as is listed right now on the slide. So we are always available. So make a phone call, send us an email. We can answer everything. And it's always on the actual show site as well. So questions, we do have a few questions here. As a reminder, when should we join the Zoom link?
Oh, yes. So for our, I was thinking about Zoom today. Sorry about that. But when you should join your space selection Zoom link, we recommend joining about 3 to 5 minutes before your appointment. And now that I would say that's if it's just one person selecting your space. If you have multiple people from your team selecting space, we recommend at least 5 minutes in advance. That way your team has joined the waiting room. Our team can then let you in from the waiting room, verify which company you're with, and then you're ready for your appointment. So you want to give yourself an extra, I would say, 5 minutes or so before that actual scheduled appointment time. And that way we can make sure to get you in order of when, your appointment is.
Great. And what happens if we miss a Zoom appointment?
Good question. So if you were to miss your Zoom appointment, as contracted exhibitors, we do pick your space on your behalf based on the preferences that you requested in your contract. Now, if for any reason you miss that appointment and then you need to hop back onto Zoom, those Zoom rooms will be valid for the entire day. So you can hop on at any other point. And when we have a free appointment time, we will be able to chat with your team and see if you'd like to be moved anywhere. And if at any point, for any reason, you're not able to get a hold of us on Zoom, you can always email us at info@thenafemshow.org as well. And we'll make sure to be monitoring that if you need to move your space. But because everyone that is participating in space selection has a contract, we do place you based on those preferences during your time.
Okay, great. I think you answered this before, but I just want to double check. So one of the questions that came in is, what's with the gaps between some booths? For example, what should be like between booth 1634 and 1636, and then 1670 and 1672? And I think that you said that those were service aisles. Is that correct? Or is that, can you verify?
Yeah, and I can actually also pull up the floor plan too, just so we can see visually. Jackie,
You
sorry, do you
wanna-
want to speak?
Yeah, I can speak to it if you want to pull it up. So,
Yeah.
that exact example is actually referring to, excuse me, is referring to some columns that are placed in those areas. So there's not booths built in those spaces because there are pillars there. If there is some like light grade etched out lines or some white space between booths, those are service aisles. The color coding makes it a little bit challenging to see this, but there is a designated space between back-to-back booths that allow for inline booths to run utilities. So if you are looking for an island space and you combine, you assume all of that space, but if like you choose 2426 or 2527 and there's a back-to-back booth situation, there will be a small aisle behind you that will be draped off to run utility lines.
Okay, there I am. Okay. Will there be a walkthrough outside to get to C Hall?
Yes. So the answer is yes. However, as Kelsey alluded to earlier, the main entrance that we are designating is going to be into B. So C Hall will be open. You will have access to like walking into the building that way, and there will be doors, but it will not be published as an entrance. We are not, the path of which attendees come from, and the majority of the space that NAFEM is taking over at the GWCC will be primarily on the B side. So C will be utilized. It's not like blocked off and you can't not go in, but attendees will not be entering in the doors off of C. But there will be, like, if you take an Uber to the center and your booth is closer to there, you could, for move-in purposes or something, you could enter in those doors if you choose. But attendees will primarily and only be entering in the entrances in the B side.
How about the service aisles? How wide are they?
So
And let me
They
correct
vary
myself.
in
Earlier,
size.
I was gonna say earlier, I did say 10 feet and I apologize. That was my mistake. They do vary based on the blocks of spaces. So Jackie, if you want to continue.
yeah, so the no freight aisles are in the red. I'm sorry. Oh, it was service aisles. Sorry. So the service aisles vary. It depends on the width of the booths on each side. So if you're looking at, for example, a blue and a yellow, the blues are 10 feet and the yellows are, is that 15, Kelsey?
So yeah, so blues are 12 and then the yellows are 15. So 12
Okay.
plus 15 is 27.
Yep.
So a 3
So
foot
your
aisle.
service aisle will be 3 feet. But if
Yeah.
you're looking at green and yellow, it's going to be a bigger service aisle because the
Mhm.
greens are only 10 feet deep. So depending on what configuration is, there's always going to be some service aisle. It will range from 3 feet
Mhm.
to 7 feet.
Mhm.
I did that math correctly.
Yeah.
Depends. And then the red freight aisles are also, they also vary. There could be 10-foot aisles or 20-foot aisles, depending on
Mhm.
which direction they're going.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
All right. Kelsey mentioned that food and beverage areas may change. Is this both before and after booth selections?
So they're subject to change due to the fact of a couple of different things. Like, one, we're working with our convention center team to kind of figure out what food outlets we're putting where. So the ones that have icons, the ones that have the fork and knife icon, those are built into the facility. They will have operating food. The purple noted to the bottom left in B is going to be a variety of different food outlets and seating. That will also not change. It could change in terms of, like, there's a little bit less than more, but the space itself won't change. And then we will be adding some additional food and beverage areas, and that will be dependent upon how the space is sold after space selection. So you'll see that, like, during space selection, there might be some areas that are like kind of grayed out, or there's nothing that's currently there. Based on what the fire marshal approves and what the need is, we may add some food and beverage areas and different places around the floor plan once the floor plan is more built out.
Okay. Looking for a 10 by 20 booth, is that possible? And would that be combining two 10 by 10 booths? Also, can multiple accounts join space selection at the same time? So 2 questions there, basically.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So 10 by 20s, absolutely. So if you would like any kind of 10-foot long and wide space, that's any of the green booths on the floor plan. So for instance, you can easily have a 10 by 20 by combining these 2 spaces. If you want to have a corner on the end, if you want to be in line, we can do that as well. We don't, I believe, have too many scenarios like this. In this case, we could allow it. So typically we don't allow for any kind of end cap spaces. That typically means if you were to go here and here, as an example, that wouldn't be allowed. But we do have some green 10 by 10 spaces here where you could combine those to be 10 by 20s because you're up against the wall here. So you wouldn't be blocking any of your neighbors. So we could allow it if you want to go, let's say, in a horizontal pattern. But most of the 10 by 10s on the floor plan are going to be up and down like this. Now, the other question, Alice, was about...
It was, can multiple accounts join space selection at the same time?
Yes, so good question. So this does depend on how your membership is established with NAFEM. So keep in mind that if you are what we would consider a company under an umbrella or related companies that are selecting together, if you are selecting space all together, now what that means is, let's say you have 5 companies and they're all going in this big space here together, then that means that you are allowed to select space based on the highest point total of that one of those companies. And that is how you've been assigned your current space selection appointments. But for instance, if your team has sent in separate contracts, meaning company A sent in one contract and company B sent in a separate contract, that means that you are selecting space separately based on each individual company's NAFEM member priority points. So that means you may not be selecting at the same time. The only time you're selecting for multiple companies together is if you are co-exhibiting in the same space together. So just keep that in mind. So if you have multiple emails from our team, that means that you're selecting multiple spaces at different times. If for any reason you need to move a booth after the fact, then we can always make a move based on what's available. But if you have two separate contracts and two separate sets of priority points, you can't select all at the same time because you're selecting separate booth spaces.
How many exhibitor and visitor passes are included with your booth? So take, for instance, say like a 20 by 30.
Yep,
Yeah.
I can answer that, but I'm pulling up to make sure I'm referencing the right document. The registration badge allotment is listed in the rules and regulations for reference point. And it is determined based on your square footage. So I think example was 20 by 30. Is that what I heard?
Yes. 20
Okay,
by-
so that would be 600 square feet. So if you had a 600 square feet booth, you get 20 complimentary badges with your booth space. So it varies based on your square footage. So 0 to 150 is 5, 150 to 300 is 10, then 15, 20. And that chart is indicated in your rules and regulations.
Yeah, so if I can go there really quick. Our rules and regulations. Again, I do recommend everyone printing these out. I think they're always helpful to review. But what Jackie just referenced, it is in section 13 right here, showing what she just mentioned. So based on your contracted square footage. And again, if you end up taking more space or less space during space selection, then that will affect how many badges you'll receive.
Can you show us where the loading docks are on the floor plan?
Yes. Jackie, do you want to
Yep,
go
so
ahead?
the loading
Okay.
docks, yep. The loading docks are primarily going to be located in the BC connector area. So where What's Hot, What's Cool is, and where that large 30-foot wide aisle in red is, the loading docks are on either side of those spaces. That space in between halls B and C is all like essentially one long, continuous space, but that is where the primary loading docks for the exhibit hall is.
Okay. And will exhibitors be able to hop on shuttle buses after the show to get back to hotels and whatnot?
Yes. So shuttle bus, there's a large shuttle bus drop off and pick up. It's right outside of the main concourse B of the GWCC. Basically right next to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So as it's noted here on the bottom of the floor plan, there's an arrow kind of facing left. It's along that main entrance.
So when
And
do
they'll
the
be
shuttle buses start though? Do they start like, okay, what about exhibitor setup? Do they start when exhibitor setup starts or no? Do they not start until the show?
I don't have that answer offhand. So I can circle back with whoever asked it on specific times. Going off memory, I believe until registration is open, which I believe is Monday. I don't know. Don't quote me. I don't have it in front of me.
But it's typically once the desk opens, we do have the official shuttle schedule that we actually post in our later webinar before the show in January also. So you'll have like official dates and times there.
Okay. So no, somebody asked if the presentation will be shared, and yes, it will absolutely be shared. It'll be up on the website by tomorrow. So you'll be able to gain access to it then. Do you need login credentials to get into the exhibitor council, or will the trade show contact get an email before the September 18th to access this?
Good question. So yes, if as the trade show contact, and again, if for any reason you need to change your trade show contact or update that information, you can always do that by reaching out to us at info@thenafemshow.org. It doesn't have to be the person that contracted. It can always be changed in our system. So just keep that in mind if that needs to happen. But your trade show contact will receive an email on September 18th. And it will be using your NAFEM member login credentials to be able to access the Exhibitor Resource Center. That information and more of those details will be in that specific email that goes out on the 18th.
And that next webinar will cover all the details of that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we host the webinar about the Exhibitor Resource Center on September 18th. So you'll get your trade show contact, will get that email, and we'll have that webinar so we can easily walk you through that whole process.
So let's just go back to the shuttle buses again really quick.
Sure.
Can you show us actually, can we show them like about where the shuttle buses drop off, where they, can we show them? We can't really show them here, can we? Not really. It's actually outside the main.
Yeah, it's outside. We could, if we could share a map of the overall convention center and we can note it, but it also will at some point in the near future be available on the show website. But if you're, curious in terms of flow, we can also connect with you offline.
Yeah. So if someone wants to choose a 10 by 20 inline, do they choose 2 green booths? Or I'm sorry, a 30 by 20 island? What would they choose?
I think those are 2 separate questions. So 10 by 20 inline would choose 2 green booths. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And what about a 20 by 30 or 30
And
by 20?
I actually answered that question separately, just due to the specificness, but yes, they can cross over and the service aisle essentially would make up the 30-foot wide. I think she sent 2 questions in and she meant the 30 by 20 island. So yes, the service aisle would be included.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll read this as is. Okay, is it okay if we don't submit our top booth number choices, but an area where we'd like to be?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think what's important is that if you're unable to make your space selection time, we have in your contract, if let's say you wanted to be near the NAFEM booth or center stage or one of our other areas, or maybe you want to be as close to the entrance as you can possibly get based on what's available at the time. I think it's fine to select an area, so long as, the more detail you give our team, the better that we can do in selecting your booth if you cannot make your appointment time. So if you give us a general area, we will try to stick to that. But let's say you want something right near the NAFEM booth and all of these booths have already been selected, then we will have to, of course, take the next best space. So I say the more detail you can give us, the better.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and again, reiterating the fact that specific booth numbers really aren't recommended to provide to us unless you're not able to attend the space selection. We recommend that you have them in mind when you log into the Zoom account, just to keep our process on schedule.
So here's someone that says we have 5 badges. Are we able to change out the names so we can rotate our staff?
So while you site, no, we don't typically allow you to switch out your staff. If you are in need of additional representatives for your booth staff, we ask that you just email info@thenafemshow and we can work with you.
Yeah. Do we have priority return container labels?
So later in the planning process, there will be, so the answer is yes, there will be a priority return labeling process that will be a form in the service kit that we launch in September that you have the ability to request. Also be a very strict move-in freight map that showcases when you are allowed to move in based on how the show has to move in freight. So both of those things will be available in September. And if you choose to do the priority return container labels, that is up to you and you can fill out those forms.
Okay. So I'm not sure what this one says. How early will attendees have access to the exhibitor floor? So I don't know if that means like on the day of, like what show dates, or if they mean ahead of time to see where exhibitors are going to be located.
So the show schedule is posted on the website. It's also in the rules and regulations. The earliest that there would be any attendees on the show floor would be
First day.
9 a.m. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Thursday, 9 a.m. Friday, unless they are looking to attend training time, which is designated between 8 and 9 o'clock on Thursday and Friday. No attendees are able to access before either of those times on our show days. Just exhibitor staff, booth staff.
Just a couple more.
Sure.
So if I take a green and yellow to make a 30 by 20 island, I don't think you answered, maybe you answered this. Will the utility line interfere with the booth layout?
No, so if you end up combining space and the service aisle is essentially removed, then there could be a utility port in your booth, but it's not going to be obstructive. So you would just, if you need utilities for your booth, that's where it would pull from, unless you chose to go with a ceiling option. But there would not be an interference of like an aisle in your space. It's only designated if the booths are in line and they're facing back to back. There's a service aisle to, allow for utilities to be run between those individual booths.
Okay. So if someone RSVP'd for their call, but they didn't note the booths that they were considering, is there a way that they can still provide that info?
So, sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, the RSVP allows our team to know that you will definitely be at your space selection appointment. So during that appointment is when you can then designate what your preferences are.
But
However,
they RSVP. They already
Yeah,
RSVP'd. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you already RSVP'd.
Mhm.
However, if you were to click on that RSVP link, you also can see that if you're unable to make your appointment time, that is when you'll designate either booth numbers or areas that you would like to be near if you cannot make that time. But if
Okay.
you can make it, you'll just complete that RSVP, and then we know that you will show up live on your Zoom appointment.
Okay. All right. I think that about does it. We're just about at our time. So, just a reminder that a recording of today's webinar will be posted by tomorrow for reference at the NAFEM Show site at thenafemshow.org. If you haven't already signed up for the next webinar taking place on September 18th at 2 p.m., it's how to access and use the Exhibitor Resource Center. So we encourage you to go out there and sign up for the next webinar. And that's it. Thanks for joining us and hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.